All right, welcome back to the number one breakfast show in the country, Morning at NTV, and we are here to talk about the commercialization of the East Africa crude oil pipeline. Yes, two important agreements were signed yesterday. The host government agreement and the shareholders agreement was signed yesterday. So what we anticipate is the final investment decision to be worked on, and also the availability of over $10 billion. Yes, that is for the Tilenga project for ENP Total, and also the Sinox Kingfisher project. That will cost some 6.8 billion. Now the rest, 3.8 billion, will be the capex for the East Africa crude oil pipeline project. So we'd like to know the modalities of what happened yesterday at State House when President Samia Suluhu Hassan made her way to this country to sign these agreements. I do have the Associate Director for the Great Lakes Institute for Strategic Studies, Mr. Godbert Mushabe. He's not alone. We have via Zoom, and in South Africa, that is Mr. Tony Otowa. He is the Executive Director at Stanbic Business Incubator Limited. He will be joining us via Zoom. A very good morning, Mr. Godbert Mushabe.
Good morning, Rabi.
All right, the viewers might not know what activity was held yesterday at State House. We'd like you to get us acquainted. What are the implications of this activity at the State House for the East Africa crude oil project, the upstream, the Tilenga, the Kingfisher projects, and the Tilenga projects? What does it mean?
No, essentially what we had yesterday was what I would call a painfully slow but also steady progress in Uganda's efforts to extract and export our oil reserves.
Indeed.
Because listeners may understand, or viewers may understand that Uganda announced discovery of commercially viable quantities of oil in 2006. And in 2008, there were actually very systematic moves to make progress towards exploration. And in 2008, government adopted the national oil policy, basically to provide a framework that guides the exploration of oil. And from that time, there were actually, lots of, a lot of more or less like inertia that we are almost making progress, but then we are not making progress. There were also concerns about the secrecy within which the oil exploration activities were being undertaken. And therefore, you remember the famous debates in 2011, I think that's 2011, when Parliament forced the convening, a special session of Parliament to demand for information about oil. The President then addressed a special session of Parliament. And then eventually, around 2013-14, then we saw pieces of relevant pieces of legislation, especially governing upstream and then revenue management coming up, being enacted by Parliament. So really, there has been a lot of work undertaken, a lot of shifting timelines. So basically, this oil thing has almost been a moving target. I remember in 2017, when Minister Muloni had, addressed Parliament, she gave a brief to Parliament, and I think in 2017 they had just we had just signed an intergovernmental agreement with Tanzania on the development of the crude oil pipeline. But again, in that brief, the minister was basically saying, "Oh, we are briefing you because we are going to start producing oil by 2020." So 2020 is here, and we are still struggling with the conclusion of all the agreements around the project, but and more so the pipeline project. And so seeing the signing ceremony at State House yesterday was like, okay, we are making progress.
Indeed.
But I can assure you that even reading the communique, you can see that there is a lot of unfinished business.
Indeed.
Yes.
Well, of course, we also do have the Executive Director, Stanbic Business Incubator Limited, that is Tony Otowa, live from South Africa. Mr. Godbert Mushabe, Tony was giving us a brief preamble of where we've come from as long as oil in this country is concerned. Now, fast forward to what we saw yesterday, the signing of the host government's agreement and also the shareholders' agreement. What are the implications of these agreements being signed on the commercialization of the East Africa crude oil pipeline, Mr. Tony?
Hi. First of all, I must say, from a business perspective, it is a great opportunity.
Indeed.
I mean, it's a great thing for Uganda as a country, but also a great thing for the East African region as an entire region. For the first time, we are now seeing oil discussion in motion in terms of real activity. And also what is very interesting about this is that now we can start really honing on these aspects of local content that we have been talking about. For many Ugandans, we all know that this oil discussion has been one that has been in the air for quite some time. But many have been skeptical, especially when it comes to the area of when to engage or how to engage. Now, it's true, Godba mentioned that earlier in the past years, before 2011 or around 2011, many Ugandans were not certain of what was happening in the sector. And in fact, when the industry did an industry baseline survey, which came out in 2013, what we realized when I was working at Total was that the biggest challenge for most local businesses or local entities was visibility of a demand, the lack of knowledge of what's happening, the contracts that are coming in, and the opportunities that are within the sector. But what we also need to understand, and why yesterday is very historic and quite great, is that all of this is happening with the backdrop of, or the fact that the government has actually put in policies, has put in laws or acts to govern the sector. We have formidable institutions like Petroleum Authority and of course, a Uganda National Oil Company, which are mandated to really support Ugandans' interests in this whole story. Unlike many countries, and I'll repeat, many countries, including Nigeria that we keep talking about, started producing oil without putting such measures in place to take care or to support them in moderating the sector. We are very privileged as a country that all of these were put in place, and by putting them in place, we can actually see that we are going to have a sector that is fully in control by Ugandans. But also what's very important to note here is yesterday really brings into perspective or into motion or notion the idea of Ugandans to get their businesses ready as soon as possible. We have been talking about this. We have been laboring to really bring this discussion to the core of many conferences or conventions on oil and gas. But what has been happening is that it has just been a conversation. The action or the attitude for the Ugandans to go back and perform or make their businesses better has been very reluctant. Now, more than ever, Ugandans need to step up because, again, the oil and gas sector is a very time-bound sector. It's a very capital-intensive sector, and it's a sector that demands for standards that have to be adhered to. So these international companies and the contractors will not wait for we Ugandans to become better before they start. They will move ahead. So we cannot wait for the train to start moving and start getting prepared. So I think right now, the conversation really should be, how can we support more Ugandan businesses to jump onto this great story? How can we support more local entities to understand this sector in a layman's term or layman's language? Many people think actually the oil and gas sector is very technical and it's very, difficult for people to understand. But in our opinion, from what we have seen with the training of the businesses that have gone through the Stanbic Business Incubator, we have seen that many businesses have been able to improve on how they do business. They have become more compliant. They have understood the sector more. And for many of them, they are now prepared to engage in the sector. So these are the stories we want to create as a way of adding value in terms of local content or local retention in the Ugandan economy.
Tony Otoa, the Executive Director of the Stanbic Business Incubator Limited, right there, live from South Africa. Thank you very much, Tony. I can see him static a bit, but we shall get back to you. Godba Tumushabe, he's very optimistic, talking about how Ugandans should ready their businesses for this windfall. Do you also share the same optimism about what is happening here?
I'm very cautiously optimistic in the sense that, and I feel Tony's optimism when you think of where we've been and where we are now.
Indeed.
It's really phenomenal that all of a sudden, after all this time of haggling and juggling, we have reached a point where we are signing these agreements. But again, really the devil is in the detail. Because when you read the communique, you actually, if you read the communique carefully, it's telling you that there is a lot more to be done. I think one of my disappointments yesterday was the idea that Tanzania has not signed the host country agreement for the EACOP company. one would imagine that a project like this one, where we have an intergovernmental agreement, in other words, there is already agreement on how to proceed especially between the two countries that are hosting this project. And because there is an agreement, then you could expect that all these processes move together in terms of negotiations. The fact that we have signed a host country agreement and Tanzania hasn't signed means that Tanzania is still have issues to be resolved. And how long that takes, you definitely cannot know. But also I think I agree with Tony on the fact that in terms of the legal framework, I think that we have done phenomenally very well. Putting in place the appropriate legislation in terms of the development of the resource, in terms of public finance management, in terms of local content legislation. But you see, in this country, things do not fail because there is no law. Things fail because actually the people who are supposed to enforce the law do not either enforce it or do not follow it themselves.
I see.
Yeah, so the mere fact that you have the laws in place is no cause of excitement for me as someone who has been following legislation across sectors, by the way. So petroleum sector brings its own complications because of the nature of the resource. So if we have issues implementing laws in many other sectors, then you can expect that even for petroleum, it could even be very, very complex. So I am cautiously optimistic that because there have been all this movement along in terms of creating the laws, in terms of creating institutions, that we can get the institutions to work, because we know that institutions in this country do not work. If you look, and we can go one by one. I think we've been lucky that in the energy sector, we've had the petroleum department really working very well. We've had the petroleum authority probably with proper leadership, trying and working against all odds to make things work. And one hopes that then they can maintain that posture in terms of work. I would say that as someone who follows this sector very closely, I actually think that one of the problems that Tony alluded to is that Ugandans, I don't think that they are fully mobilized around the project or around around the oil project, because they are private sector companies. Ordinarily, in every business, you go to mining. There's a lot of business going on in mining. Many individuals and companies engaged in the mining activities. If anything, there are actually communities out there. I interact with communities in Mubende that are suffering from gold exploration, like companies that are engaged in gold exploration. In fact, with gold, especially in areas like Mubende, even people from security will tell you that there you have to have a godfather to be able to engage in gold extraction in some of these areas.
So you feel like the same modalities might be present in the oil?
Absolutely, because I think that even when the government committed to full transparency on oil exploration activities, I don't feel like the government provides adequate information to any of the relevant entities, first of all, the citizens, but more so to institutions like Parliament, because so you have the host country agreement, you have the shareholders agreement, you have the intergovernmental agreement, but you rarely have any information about what these documents provide. So it's people who have signed, and the other parties on the other hand who know. For us as Ugandans, we basically read and say, oh, we have signed an intergovernmental agreement.
Indeed.
But what commitments have you made on my behalf as a citizen? Because it is never true that all the issues that are discussed in these agreements are business confidentiality issues. No, they are those issues that could get rights and obligations on the part of the state and the citizens, which I am entitled to know as a citizen. So I get this impression that actually right from 2011 when there was an attempt to open up,
Indeed.
the sector is actually even closing more in terms of access to information.
Let me also bring in Tony Otowa. Tony Otowa, do you also share the same sentiments with Mr. Godber Tumushabe, who says Ugandans have had little knowledge about what is happening in the oil process? There is little literature on the same, little involvement of the residents right here in Uganda. What do you make of this? Do you also share the same sentiments? And also, when you're done with it, what opportunities are present for my Ugandans in this country when we talk about oil?
Okay. First of all, I would like to say I disagree with Godba on the access to information or the availability of information. I think, to be fair, Petroleum Authority has a website where a lot of this information is actually put out. A lot of this information is put out for your ordinary Ugandans to go and engage. And their offices are wide open. If you went to Entebbe or Amber House, they're wide open for any Ugandan to access information that is needed. But also, we also need to be clear that the oil and gas companies, the international oil companies, every quarter hold what they call supplier development forums. In these supplier development forums, any Ugandan, anyone has the opportunity to engage with the companies and ask whatever questions they would like to ask, all the way from the contracts that are upcoming onto the policies and what is necessitated for them to engage with these companies. So I don't think it is fair to say that a lot of this information is kept away. In fact, I would like to add that a lot of these issues, like the host government agreement or all of these agreements, for instance, the ones that were signed yesterday, the information is not hidden anywhere. It is very open information that has been in discussion for quite some time. And in fact, if you went to any of the entities that have been part of this story, they will be able to disclose everything. I know for sure, as a fact, that as part of the people who have been trying to promote the access to information in this area for quite some time now, we have brought on board policy experts, but also industry experts from within the company and the authority and the ministry. And to be honest with you, if you see the level of engagement over the last few years as compared to before 2011, you will find that there is so much information that is being put out. Now, the Uganda Chamber of Mines and Petroleum, which we are part of, is also very instrumental in supporting the private sector, especially your Ugandan companies, to understand what's going on. They have conferences and conventions and masterclasses that happen almost all the time. In fact, one should be happening between the 5th to the 7th of May. All of these, gentlemen, are to support Ugandans to understand the sector, but also to find the best ways of engaging in the sector. And I think it's a great thing. It's a great thing. But let us also now just move on to those opportunities which are for Ugandan businesses. And like I said, we are very privileged as a country to have laws and policies or a legal framework that actually ring fences some opportunities for Ugandan businesses. Civil works construction, transport logistics, catering, security, all the way to communication and marketing. I mean, all of these areas, about 15 of them, ring-fenced for Ugandan businesses in the sense that it is Ugandans who should take on these contracts. No one else but Ugandans. But, like I said, we need to understand that it's not just about they being for Ugandans, but Ugandans also having businesses that are compliant enough to take on those opportunities. Because you see, if a Ugandan cannot provide standards for, say, the transport, the provision of a PSV vehicle, a passenger service vehicle, to transport workers between the oil fields and Kampala, and a foreign company comes in with the right requirements, because, like I said, it's a time-bound sector, you won't have to, or there won't have to be the need to wait for Ugandans to prepare. We need to be cognizant of this one. And I think in having these discussions about oil and gas, it is important for us to put on the hat of the inconvenient truth. Inconvenient truth. Our Ugandan mentality is one where, because something is for us, we assume that it is for us. But we need to understand that we have to also position ourselves to be able to be that or reflect that, in the sense that we are standardized companies, we are compliant companies, we are conforming to the standards of the sector to be able to take on these opportunities. And gents, this is possible. In the incubator, we have seen companies that were briefcase companies
We trained them, we nurtured them, we supported them on getting compliant. We supported them in becoming ISO certified. These companies today are doing works for Sinopec, the Chinese offshore company. They are doing works for Bolloré. They are doing works for the water extension project from Katosi into Kampala. All of this happened in less than 18 months. This is proof of fact that it is possible for Ugandan businesses to take on these great contracts, but we have to take care of our businesses first. And in terms of talking about these opportunities, which are of course enormous, it's going to be very important for us to understand that adhering to standards and compliance is very key. And I think you can see how I've mentioned the standards and compliance very much in this conversation. It's because even without this, you won't be able to jump onto these opportunities. But also, if you want to get more information about the oil and gas sector, start by having your business in the National Supplier database of the Petroleum Authority. How many Ugandan businesses are in that database? And to get into that database, it's very easy. Uganda Registration Services Bureau certificate, URA compliance certificate, NSSF compliance certificate, and a letter from your bank to kind of like show that you are actually, in activity. Those 4 requirements are the most basic you can actually have in terms of getting into the sector. But I think it's important for us to really see ways in which we can support our Ugandan businesses. And it is possible. Low-hanging fruits are available. It is time to begin engaging. Let us stop blaming, complaining. Let us now get to working.
Incubator Limited coming to you live from South Africa. Thank you very much, Tony. Godbert Mushabe, he talked a lot. He said that there is no problem of inability to access information as far as oil and gas is concerned in Uganda. But then I would like you to talk to the individual who is watching NTV Uganda right now, the Ugandan who is watching. What should they do to tap into these opportunities?
First of all, listening to Tony, say, you need to do compliance.
Indeed.
So first of all, do you have a business? We know that almost in this country, the majority of us do business informally. You may find even Tony and all of us do business as individuals. It's unlikely that you are going to go as an individual and say, I want to get into the supplier, the supplier database.
Indeed.
So in other words, there is even the basic that even before you do the things that Tony is talking about, registering, having these certificates, you have to be able to go form a company, register it, and then work on compliance.
And we're talking about 80% of the population being in the informal sector, people who can't read and write.
Yeah, no, I think probably Tony will agree with me that it is the oil business is not going to be for the ordinary person out there who is somewhere in Karamoja or Ntungamo.
And who are the majority.
Yes, and who are the majority. But I think the point that is being made here is that those of us who have the privilege of knowing this information, of having this information, we should be able to really challenge ourselves and be able to take a step and say, I want to engage in this business. So what do I do to play in there? Because you see, in most cases, we are constrained by the basics things of survival. As a country, we are confronted with so many challenges that at the end of the day, you are dealing with short-term survival instincts. You are dealing with those ones. But for petroleum activities, you also need to think long-term. So in other words, even if I didn't have a business that is running now, in another 2-3 years, can I have something that is really qualified to be able to compete at different levels? And I think Tony did a good job basically breaking down some of those businesses that are ring-fenced for Ugandans. Some of them are not, they are not complex things, especially in the area of logistics. You could find that I probably can think of, even today I could go and train in how to run an efficient restaurant because I may not need to go to get a degree to run a restaurant.
You need a skill.
I need a skill. So I think that's where we need to be, as Ugandans, that's where we need to focus. And then, because once we prepare ourselves, and then we are able to begin to see the buzz to entry. Because nothing is rosy. In business, like I said, I follow a lot in the mining business. Entry into the mining business is very, very complicated because of the way the industry is structured. I don't think that the oil industry would be much less complicated, but at the end of the day, we need to challenge ourselves and be able to say, I need to go in there and play there, because once you are playing there, then you are able to identify the bars to entry, and then you focus on removing those bars to entry. Yeah.
Tony, you had Mr. Godber Tumushabi. He talks about the 80% being in the informal sector, people who might be left out from enjoying this oil resource. What do you have to say about that? How do we get these people back into the fold or the bracket?
You know, at the Stanbic Business Incubator, we've actually understood that. And that is why we have also going to focus on the agriculture value chain. Think about it. You're going to have close to 15,000 people directly employed and located in the Albertine area, eating quality food, okay? Not Mama Mary food, but quality food. Now, as a country, I can assure you that the demand for food will be so high that we cannot actually sustain that quality demand for over a period of 5 months. So what we have started at the Business Incubator is to support on the training of quality food, and also trying to aggregate farmers in the different parts of the country to be able to provide those foods. In that way, you will, first of all, understand that not every Ugandan will actually get a job in the oil and gas sector. Not every Ugandan will provide a good or service, but they can provide food. Your mother, your woman who is in the village in Ntungamo can actually provide fresh tomatoes which can be used in the oil camps. And these can actually be paid for at a premium price. What we have seen over the last period of years is that we have constantly kept this agriculture story out of this whole bigger picture. But think about it. The guys in the camps will need to eat. As I speak right now, we are importing garlic from China. Why should we be importing garlic from China, yet we can actually have that grown in Uganda to provide, food in Uganda? If you went to Hoima right now, I will tell you, gentlemen, Hoima cannot take care of 400 goat bars in one day. 400 goat bars today in Hoima in one day will be a strain on Hoima in terms of accommodation and food. So what we have to do now is to try and make sure that Hoima alone, first of all, can take care of 2,000 goat bars in one day. So we need to be working on supporting the local businesses, the local people, the local youth, women, in providing valuable inputs into the sector through agriculture. And agriculture, for me, is the lowest hanging fruit where we can engage massively. So we have actually started a massive model farm in Hoima. And this model farm is, of course, with Dr. Nalima of the 1 Acre Farm. What we're trying to do is to train your smallholder farmers on growing quality products or quality produce that can be taken on. And by doing this as well, we have plugged into the oil and gas companies that are going to be supporting on the catering. So you have a visibility of the value chain from the farmer, the lady, the youth in the small village up to the plate that will be serving a Muzungu who will be eating his salad in the oil camp. Those are the stories that speak to everyone benefiting. So yes, we need to work now, but we need now to increase and work in a higher gear as I speak right now.
Saying today, Hoima cannot take care of 400 goat bars if they landed in that town. Explain to me, from your perspective, what do you think is the problem? Because oil was, the activities started here in 2006. And all this time we have been dealing with preparedness. So almost 14 years later, where do you think is the deficit? Why are we in that position you're describing?
Why haven't we been able to develop
Absolutely.
the agricultural sector?
You can understand. Yeah. Gentlemen, you can understand the fact that the whole sector has been silent.
Yes.
Many people went in, bought trucks. Many people started building hotels. If you went into Hoima, as you're entering into Hoima, there's a Protea hotel that has been in limbo, since 2013.
You can
now, I mean, the construction came to a halt. People's trucks are rotting in their parking yards. All of this just goes to show you that because of the length in getting to where we are today or yesterday, many Ugandans lost hope and moved on to other sectors. Many of the businesses we trained have actually diversified into other sectors as they wait for the oil and gas sector. So the attention into preparedness for the sector was not at full throttle like we would have expected it to be.
Indeed.
But I think now more than ever, our eyes have been now open because now we can see things happening. And if you remember, or if you recall, everyone has been asking the question, when is FID happening? When is FID happening? Now
Very soon.
FID has seemed like a thing that is happening anytime now. The most important agreements are done. FID is happening. Commercialization is now what is on the table. Those commercialization discussions are going to end very soon. Are we prepared? Are we still going to be hesitant and doubting Thomas's, wondering when this is going to happen? Or can we now start working on our businesses to get them ready? I think that is what is really, really important.
Well,
but
thank
let
you
me
very
just
much, Tony.
end with Hoima. In Hoima, you will have probably 3 or 2 hotels that can actually take care of the expatriates who are going to come into this town. Okay, and of course they all conform to standards. Now, most of our hotels are not the kind of hotels that actually, take on some of these people. Oil and gas standards as it states that you have to have an exit and an entry area in case of an emergency and all of these things. These small nitty-gritty things. They will ask you, do you have a malaria policy? How many businesses in Uganda actually know of a malaria policy? I mean, these are very important things.
All right, Tony, thank you very much.
Very important things. So it's very crucial. But yeah.
That is Tony right there. Tony Otoa is the ED Stanbic Business Incubator Limited. Well, Tony, the fund investment decision shall be coming anytime in the next following weeks. The availability of $10 billion, 6.8 of which $1 billion will go to the development of the Tilenga Oil Project and also Sinok's Kingfisher Project. And we also do know this, is it the engineering, procurement, and construction, awarding of the EPC
there's also the
contract is also
refinery,
taking center stage in the coming weeks.
There's
But then
also
I wanted us to focus on the East Africa Crude Oil Pipeline, Godberto Mushabi. How does the East Africa Crude Oil Pipeline commercialize the oil resource?
I mean, that is probably I think the pipeline is probably the most strategic of all the investments that we are making around this oil industry. That the fact that we can be able to evacuate this oil to Tanga definitely is so central in whatever we do.
I see.
We know that part of the oil industry infrastructure in this country includes the Greenfield oil refinery in Hoima, which is still under consideration. We have all these infrastructure projects, including the airport, which is under construction. But I think that any decision to embark on the construction of the pipeline for me is probably the game changer that Tony is talking about.
Yes.
That the moment that decision is made, but more importantly,
Yes.
the moment the construction of the pipeline starts, then for me there is the game changer, and because then it makes even the extraction of the oil viable, because you can evacuate it to whatever destination that you want. So I think that's the most important thing that I would say we need to keep our eyes on. I am hoping that with the agreements that were signed yesterday, I am hoping that both the Republic of Tanzania and the Republic of Uganda and the oil companies can create a certain degree of certainty in the way the project is evolving. Because you see, as I said earlier, really our oil sector, the targets for oil production have been a moving target since 2012. Now we are in 2021. So, and one can understand that there are so many discussions, so many negotiations taking to go on. So many ups and downs in terms of the players in the industry, because we are basically small countries. Even when we say we are
Brent
sovereign
crude prices
countries,
coming down.
oil prices coming down, but we're also countries that are essentially poor, negotiating with rich corporations. You know that most of the money that we're going to invest in this sector, including our own stake in the pipeline company, is going to be borrowed. So we are borrowing. So in other words, we are borrowing to be able to get this sector moving. So I hope that from this point going forward, that we can have a certain degree of certainty that this is how the industry moves. So that if you are an industry actor, and Tony made a very, very important point, which is really, sometimes these are painful things that maybe you have to go through them to even get to where we're going. The fact that people invested, people imported trucks and they have been laying there in their yards, and people started businesses, and then we couldn't get to the right decision. So having now signed these additional agreements, because they are real additional agreements, I am hoping that both the two governments and the companies can provide a certain degree of certainty on how the projects move.
Indeed.
Because really,
Certainty is the biggest issue.
I think
Because I'm looking at a
I think
farmer.
certainty is the biggest issue.
I'm looking at a farmer who has been waiting for the oil resource since 2007,
absolutely.
planting
Yeah.
2008,
Yes.
2010, waiting
Yeah.
for the construction
Yes.
to begin.
I mean, Tony talked about
He
the
talked about
Protea
it.
Hotel.
Indeed.
So you build your hotel, and it's like I am going to cash in on the windfall.
And
Then the
commercialization
windfall
doesn't start.
The windfall doesn't come until 10 years later. So I hope,
Indeed.
and I would want to also hear from Tony if he actually sees certainty coming into the industry, because Tony and the incubator have been doing incredible work, you know, helping these countries to prepare.
Indeed.
Because I think that's one of the things that we really need as a country. I don't know, Tony, if at this moment...
And I was sensing some skepticism, Godbert Mushabe, like you
Yeah.
don't believe commercialization of the oil resource might start by 2025.
No, that's my... I have always, even as early as 2017, when the minister was saying we'll produce oil by 2020, I was always saying that my best optimistic projection was 2025. Now, I think that the signing of the agreements yesterday gives me a sense of satisfaction that maybe 2025 we can be able to hit that
Because
target.
most of the hurdles are out of the way.
Yeah, most of the hurdles are out of the way. This region is politically unstable. I believe that these companies are very sensitive to political uncertainty and instability. So my view is that even as they come in, companies can always overlook some of these things, but they always pay attention to them. So as we look at commercializing the resource, I think that the governments need to pay attention to creating a certain level of political stability and stabilizing the political environment, so that we reduce on the uncertainties that are created for all the actors in the industry.
And also government has to ready Ugandans
Yeah.
to tap into this oil resource. I
No,
mean, if construction starts and then Ugandans are still clamoring to start a business.
I think we have to rely more on
Certainty.
we have to rely more on actors like the Stanbic Business Incubator. If we can get more of these, that because I don't think that this is going to be business of government to ready the private sector. I think government can only support, can only help out one or the other. But I think that the most reliable of all these actions are things like the incubator. You know, if the Chamber of Mines and Minerals was, you know, organized to run programs for actors in the industry, I think I have more faith in those kinds of actions, those kinds of actors in terms of preparedness, than saying, "Oh, government of Uganda should do this," because government of Uganda itself has proved to be unprepared at all these times because of the time they have taken. I've never believed that we should have taken this long.
And you don't
Then this
believe
was to
Ugandans might
flow.
be unprepared to tap into this oil resource?
No,
First of all, in terms of education, in terms of
I know-
skills,
no, these are-
and in terms of readiness to tap into the
There
opportunities.
have been efforts, Romeo. There have been efforts. Whether these efforts are enough is something that is debatable. But I think we have to we can give credit to the fact that there have been efforts. I think Ministry of Energy has been really has been up to the game
They
in terms
have.
of the things that they do.
I've been hosting them. They've been
Yes,
coming.
I think they're incredible, because even when the way they are organized, you feel like they operate very differently from all the other ministries that I engage with.
Indeed.
So really credit goes to them.
Honorable Chitutu
Yeah.
is doing a great job.
Yeah, so no, forget about the ministers. You see, the problem with you people is that
Let's not go
we
there.
know the people.
Let's engage Tony.
There are
Yeah.
people in the ministry.
Indeed.
Very, very committed public servants,
All
by
right,
the way.
all right.
In most cases, they are disrupted by the political environment and all the mambo jumbo that goes around. But they are committed people within these ministries
Who love their
that
country.
want things to be done
Indeed.
and want to move, and then they are held hostage by the brokenness of our politics.
Indeed. Let's take you back live to South Africa and talk to Mrs. Tony Otowa. He is the ED, Stanbic Business Incubator Limited. Tony, a very good morning once again. I'm sure we still have you online. How does the East Africa crude oil pipeline commercialize the oil resource? Acquaint us.
Sorry, can you repeat that question again?
The East Africa crude oil pipeline commercialize the oil resource.
Oh, how does it commercialize?
First of all, let me just begin with where Godba ended. First of all, I want to say that I'm very optimistic that we are actually going to get into the the development phase very soon. What we actually have as a stumbling block, gentlemen, is something very, very basic. If this is a marathon, a 42-kilometer marathon, we are now in the 1 kilometer the last kilometer to the finishing line, because what you have is simply the ECOP bill, which has to go through Parliament. That is a no-brainer. It's going to pass very soon or anytime now. On the other side, you Godba talked about the HGA, which hasn't yet signed in Tanzania. That's going to be signed now with what happened yesterday. But also, finally, the whole commercialization conversation is going to actually be one that is going to be expedited. And trust me, in the few coming months, we shall be having what we call FID. And for me, this is a good thing. It's a good thing for many Ugandans who have been trying to get themselves ready. But on the other hand, it's a paradox. On the other hand, it's a bad thing, because not many businesses are ready. Because you see, when FID happens, it is dog eat dog wild. If you're not ready, you're not ready. If you're ready, you're ready. You have to play catch up. Okay? So think about it. We've been talking about manpower that is going to be needed, and interestingly, by the way, when you look at manpower, I'm not talking about your guys who have done master's degrees in Aberdeen, your PhD holders, your engineers, and so on and so forth. You're talking about artisans and craftsmen, your pipe welders, your fitters, your plumbers. How many of those do we have? I was just telling guys here recently, for the pipeline alone, we need close to over 3,000 welders, qualified welders by the American Welding Society. Do you know how many we have in the country? We have less than 300 qualified welders. That is a huge deficit that needs to be filled. So in fact, for me, the whole FID thing is a little bit, too rushed. I would actually rather it waits a little bit for us to get our businesses ready. But again, we cannot keep waiting. We cannot keep waiting. For the businesses to get involved in the oil and gas sector as well, we have been talking about this for quite some time. We've been talking about preparedness. It is kind of like, telling you to go and get your vaccine because there's an uncertainty of a virus that could be coming, but just get your vaccine so that in the eventuality the virus appears on your doorstep, you are bulletproof. Many people are still hesitant. They are still skeptical. So, this just goes to show you that, again, it's a paradigm shift that has to be taken into perspective. So the need for us to now up our game is now. The time is now. We cannot keep dilly-dallying. We cannot keep having conversations about when we should be ready or how we should be ready. It is about how can we be ready to engage immediately. But also one very important aspect in terms of getting Ugandan businesses ready quickly is to leverage on partnerships. This animal of the oil and gas sector is too big. It's like a small rat trying to eat an elephant. It is too huge an opportunity, but it can only be enjoyed if we leverage on partnerships, joint venture partnerships with firms that understand this story, or with international businesses that have been part of the game, as a way of learning very quickly about how to do the business in the oil and gas way. Because again, you're benefiting off the transfer of skills and knowledge. But also number two, like I mentioned before, it's capital intensive. Not very many businesses have the opportunity or access to the capital that will be necessitated for some of the contracts. So by partnering with a lot of these foreign firms or local entities, it's a great opportunity for the businesses to be able to get onto that capital that is needed for their contracts. Commercialization is a great thing. It's going to happen. FID is definitely going to happen, and thank God it's happening very soon. But we cannot just stop with the hallelujah praises. We now need to go into the workman praises, where we are working hard to get ourselves into this. We do not want a scenario like so many countries that have, like Ghana, for instance, that discovered oil about the same time with us and went full throttle into production of oil. And now they are working backwards to take care of environmental laws, local content laws, and all of these things. We want to be a country that has benefited from the fact that we have all of these legal frameworks in place to maximize these opportunities. It is possible. I have seen businesses through the business incubator making it possible. I think, and I know, and I believe it is possible, but we have to really become truthful to ourselves. And that's why I called it the inconvenient truth. We need to fact check ourselves and our businesses and make sure that
with Tony Otoa, the Stanbic Business Incubator Limited.
We are ready. Thank you very much.
Amazing insight from Tony Otoa. He is the ED Stanbic Business Incubator Limited. We also do have Mr. Godber Tumushabe. He is the Associate Director, Great Lakes Institute for Strategic Studies. We are talking about the East Africa Crude Oil Pipeline. Let's take a breather. We'll be right back with The Country Morning at NTV. My name is Romy Busiku. I still have the Associate Director for the Great Lakes Institute for Strategic Studies. That's none other than Mr. Godber Tumushabe. We also do have from South Africa live, that is Mr. Tony Otoa. He is the ED of the Stanbic Business Incubator Limited, with whom I'm sharing details on the East Africa Crude Oil Pipeline. We also do know that French company Total, that is ENP, it owns 72% majority stake in the East Africa Crude Oil Pipeline shareholding company. And then we do know that the Uganda National Oil Company, UNOC, owns only 15% stake in the same East Africa Crude Oil Pipeline shareholding company. And we also do know that CNOC owns only 8% stake in the East Africa Crude Oil Pipeline shareholding company. And the TPDC, which is the Tanzania Petroleum Development Company, has only 5% stake. I would like to know, Godber Tumushabe, before we go into prices falling down as far as oil is concerned, why is Total, ENP, having the biggest majority stake in the East Africa Crude Oil Pipeline project company?
I would basically say that Total is the lead investor in this project. Because when you are doing projects of this nature, of this magnitude, you are looking for financing. The stake is determined by your financing.
Indeed.
It's first of all, it's determined by the nature of ownership that you negotiate. If you have enough money to put in the project, you can actually negotiate for a higher stake. But if you don't have enough money, there is no way you can negotiate that stake. So Total holds the high stake because it is going to be responsible for putting together the bulk of the financing for the project. So Uganda has 15%, Uganda, the national oil company, has 15%. That's the contribution they will make towards the project. But essentially, you would say this is as you called it, it's a stake. Each one of us is biting a piece that we can manage or that we are interested in. First of all, actually, it's the interest, and then second, you can manage. Because if I was Uganda, I could want to own 50% of the stake in this project. But can I raise enough money to cover up 50%? Because I can't, then I'm able to pick what I can queue and deal with that. But because of the volume of the business, 15% is a hell lot of money. It's good money. What is important is that the project works and the money is able to flow. So if you can get 15% of some 10 billion, that's not a bad deal.
We also have a 15% stake in all the oil fields that will be operated by CNOC and also Total ENP. What does that mean for Uganda?
But also Uganda benefits, besides the pipeline itself, there are benefits that accrue, as Tony was explaining here, that accrue to the businesses that are participating. Because you see, in terms of the industry, there are beneficiaries that come not as a state actor, but as businesses. If the sector is organized, if your businesses are organized, they tap into all these resources that come in, the capital that is injected in, then you are able to really achieve a certain level of business growth. Growing your own businesses, the businesses of the nationals, that is a benefit that is not necessarily attached to the percentage stake that you have in a particular project or in this oil field. So I think that's where the advantage is, that Uganda as the as the holder of this resource, there are so many things that we're able to do around the industry before the oil even gets into the pipeline to be shipped to Tanga.
All right, Tony, I was also reading some literature yesterday that actually seemed to indicate that the prices of oil have been dropping since 2015. Uganda's oil was valued at $61 billion, Tony, but that's in 2015. It was at $61 billion. That then came the Paris Climate Agreement. You had signatories, very many countries signing that agreement, and the prices of a barrel of oil dropped from $100 to $50 today. And we also do know from the Climate Policy Initiative, their findings, they actually stated that our oil dropped from 61 billion all the way to 18 billion from 2015. Now, they're also telling us it has dropped further from $18 billion to $8 billion. Mr. Tony Ottawa, do you feel like there could be a further drop in the prices of Brent crude oil in this country or internationally?
First of all, I must say that if you are very interested in the oil and gas sector for the development phase today, you should be excited about oil being at a low price because, one, it makes the project viable. For the oil companies, it makes it easier for them to negotiate with service providers or the contractors who are going to actually do the development of the project. So it makes it possible. Imagine if prices were over 100, if oil prices were over $100 per barrel. It would have been very difficult for them or the oil companies to negotiate great prices or great contract prices with the contractors. So I think for me, it's a good thing that right now it's happening. Where we could be bothered or worried about this whole pricing issue is at production, which is not going to happen in the next 5 years. So, you have the construction phase, which is going to pretty much take at least minimum of 5 years. And then you can also now worrying about, the oil prices at that point. But I think for me, it's a great opportunity for us to now have guys coming in at low negotiated prices to be able to take on these contracts. But also, it makes the decision making very quickly. Very quick. We're now talking about commercialization. We're now talking about what it takes to come to the final point of FID. This is now where that conversation on pricing comes into place. So I think for me, right now, it's not something that we should really worry about as a country, like really worry about until a certain point. Right now, our focus should be on engaging in that sector, the oil and gas development phase, which is going to be about 5 years. It's kind of like a house. When you're constructing a house or when you're planning to build a house, the most critical time is when you are balancing your BOQs, trying to find out what quantities and how much it's going to cost, and then you come to the final investment decision where you then get your contractor or your mason who's going to take care of the project. That can take about 2-3 years. And then, of course, after that, you now worry about the other things when you're inside the house, and I think that for me should be really our focus. So that shouldn't be something that I think we should really focus on. For me, it's just really focusing on the great opportunities that are coming. And from a business point of view, or the private sector point of view, it's really saying, how do we jump in immediately, but in the most efficient way where we can maximize opportunities and benefits, and in a local content way, talk about in-country retention. We were not fortunate enough in the first phase to retain enough of that money that came out of the action. This time round, we want to say we want enough of that opportunity retained in the country. But it can only be retained in the country if we have more entities participating. And that, for me, should be the position we should be really pushing for right now. More Ugandans participating in the sector, more businesses participating in the sector, and at the end of the day, more value retained in our economy.
Of the Climate Policy Initiative that we are going to be losing money because of the drop in the Brent crude oil prices. 2015, $61 billion. That was the value of our oil. Now they're saying it's only valued at $8 billion. Only 8 from 61, Tony. Tony?
Yeah, but you see, you see, when it comes to that commercialization and technical, I think I'm probably not the best person to talk about the commercialization, but I would say in what I want to really focus on, or what I want us to really focus on is, as Ugandan entities, what can we take on? What can we jump on right now You know, we cannot we cannot have the most clear or best tailored model that we can work with as a country. If we think about getting the best conditions for this act to happen, if we think about getting the best time when the ship can sail before the ship can actually sail, we might lose out on the low-hanging fruits. And I think for me, it's very important for us to say, how do we begin this engagement with
Okay,
or
thank you
without
very much, Tony.
the ideal conditions? At least we have the most prominent ideal conditions, which are the legal frameworks, and now we're supporting the businesses to get on board. That is what's really crucial. We can then work on fine-tuning the rest.
All right, thank you very much. Tony Otowa, he is the ED, Stanbic Business Incubator Limited. Mr. Godbert Mushabe, let me give you this last few minutes so that you can wrap up this conversation for us. The projections from the World Bank, this country shall be propelled to growth, middle income, upper status by 2040. That's according to the World Bank. And this country by 2030, if we can export 60,000 barrels of oil a day, we shall be making $3 billion. That is a day, Mr. Godbert Mushabe. So what do you make of these projections? Do you believe this country can run at the pace of growth of 7 to 10% from the current stagnation of 4% using the oil?
I'm not a fan of GDP. I'm not a fan of economic growth.
But here's what they say.
I'm a fan of economic development.
Here's what they say, Godbert Mushabe. They say this oil can only bring about development in Uganda if the money does not end up in the pockets of the politicians. Is this possible?
No, first of all, the money could come, and in our growth figures could actually look very, very good. There are a few industries, a few business people that could benefit, but I think for now I have argued time and again that our current system of government is not configured to ensure a broad-based benefit regime for the oil industry. Or for the country, actually, for the country. That if you look at the way government is configured, the government has has become so much patriarchal. It has become so much diverse from the population that it pursues a lot of welfare policies that do not inspire people to engage in the economy. So, in other words, you know, a lot of social welfare programs, because these programs you see, Operation Wealth Creation, Youth Livelihood, Women Entrepreneurship Fund, they look like business, they look like public investments in creating businesses, but actually they end up being run like social welfare programs, and therefore this money could come from oil. Our budget architecture is so distorted that it is unlikely to be able to, you know, to engineer a transformation in terms of local economy. Because why am I saying this? If you look at the districts today, an average district will get about 50 billion shillings in budget allocation.
Where the pipeline is going to pass.
No. Just because they say the oil revenues
districts.
are not about oil districts. The oil districts have their own share of the revenues. I'm talking about the
Overall.
budget, because
okay.
growth can only be achieved if you are investing in as a country, not just in one district, cherry picking here and there. So, but an average district can, on average, a district can get 50 billion shillings. Out of the 50 billion, about 48% of that money could be going to education, which means it is money for paying teachers. About 42% could be going to health, which means it's paying health workers. Then there is a certain percentage that goes to water. In effect, almost every district remains with no money to invest in building local economic activities. Or there is this whole structure where it is the Minister of Agriculture and the Minister of Tourism and the Minister of what that pretend like they are the ones which are bringing about the development. I have argued time and again that unless we change our current budget architecture, where the different regions of this country, a region like Bunyoro, if we have about, let's say we get oil flowing, we get money coming in, and there is a district government in Bunyoro who gets the next 10 trillion to be able to invest in building local economic infrastructure in Bunyoro. That's the only way we are going to get Ugandans to benefit. But if you still have everything commanded from Kampala, I can tell you that the bulk of that money will actually end up in pockets of the people that we have here, because I mean that's the practice. I'm not sure that it can change, even when you have oil resources.
Essentially, if we don't come up with an equal sharing mechanism, this money won't go to good use.
It's not equal sharing. It's a different architecture that allows the local population to take control of their development agenda.
Godbert Mushabe is Associate Director for the Great Lakes Institute for Strategic Studies. He was not alone. From South Africa, live we did have Mr. Tony Otoa. He is the ED, Executive Director, Stanbic Incubator, Business Incubator Limited. Thank you very much, sir, for having made the time to speak to us. Thank you very much to Godbert Mushabe for having made the time to speak to NTV Uganda. Many Ugandans were wondering what's happening as far as the oil resource is concerned. So by 2025, we could see the commercialization of the oil in this dear country of ours, Uganda, and by 2030, $3 billion on a daily basis, as long as we export 60,000 barrels of oil a day. My name is Romy Busiku, and to you who has been watching this show all the way from 6:30 up to now, we'll take a breather and return with a lot more. Ivan Walanyolo has a story for you.
You're watching Morning at NTV.